We're going to get started, if you guys don't mind, because I like to get started right on time. If people float in, fine. You know, I kind of run my class the same way. First of all, I want to thank all of the panelists that you see before you. These are all friends of mine for the various digital media programs throughout CUNY. I hit them up to basically come and present. I wanted to have kind of like an open conversational talk about developing digital media programs, some of the challenges that we all face, some of the, especially in emerging disciplines where we're working with interdisciplinary topics. So I wanted to get all of us together and to have a number of just basic conversations on what I think are some important talking points. So I have a couple of questions. I've kept them kind of in the dark about exactly what questions we want to ask, because I wanted to keep this actually very live and topical and kind of spontaneous. So they don't know what I'm going to ask them. So, but I'm hoping that this sparks hopefully a pretty vigorous discussion on running digital media programs in general, but especially running digital media programs within CUNY. So with that said, let me introduce myself. My name is James Richardson. I'm the academic director for the Communication and Media program at CUNY SBS, the School of Professional Studies. I also have an appointment at LaGuardia Community College as an assistant professor in the New Media Technology program. With that said, I'm going to basically start here and ask you to introduce yourself and just basically give us a little bit of background on the program that you run.
So, Chris Stein, I'm at BMCC, and I'm the chair of the Media Arts and Technology department. And I did not start out even in that department because it didn't exist. So the way that this became is it actually started as a grant fund to make some media programs, and they situated them in 3 different departments. In the Computer Information Systems department, normally called Computer Science, the Music and Art department, and the Speech department, which had video at the time. And so faculty were actually put into lines in those 3 departments, which not too far along, about 5 or 6 years later, we became kind of untenable as we grew in number of students. And so we ended up forming our own department and brought those 3 majors and the faculty who had been put in lines with them into that department. And so now we have our own department, close to 900 majors in it at BMCC.
Is that one of the largest within CUNY, would you say?
I'm assuming so, but I don't know the facts actually, but yeah, I think so. So yeah, we have, our majors are, there's a video arts and technology major that has a little under 400 students in it, and then a multimedia programming and design major that has usually a little over 400 students in it, which is 2 tracks. One is basically graphic design focused, and the other is now, I would say, web design focused, although it's really more programming and interactive, but we've chosen to focus in this particular point in time in the history of stuff on the web.
Hi everyone, my name is Richard Dragan from LaGuardia. I'm Director of New Media, just kind of new at this. I've been in technology a long time. Thanks to the efforts of James Richardson, who really instituted what we have at LaGuardia. We have a thriving new media program. We're growing. Students take 18 hours of core courses. They specialize two other courses in graphic design, web development, and even music production, video production. But we've been busy, very busy since the summer, instituting 4 new programs. And we're going to have new tracks in game development, mobile development, both iOS and Android, entrepreneurship, fancy word for e-commerce and business and technology, and digital journalism. It's dear to my heart. I'm a technical journalist. Google me, that's what you'll find. And we'll be offering that alongside our existing journalism department. So we'll have 5 tracks across 4 academic departments, kind of what we're doing, but we're going backwards. We'll have faculty drawn from different departments under the umbrella in humanities. We're housed in humanities. I think we're pretty happy there. Our faculty are there, but we're going to be drawing on other faculty now: English, business and technology, and computer science, mathematics, engineering, and computer science. So we're going to see where this goes. I'm really excited to be offering what students need. Obviously, mobile development will be a win. Game development, entrepreneurship. We have some amazing internship possibilities on Silicon Alley here in the city. and also digital journalism should be pretty amazing. We're aligning with both York and getting some input from the Graduate School of Journalism in town.
Okay. Sorry, you reminded me, I forgot to say, which does not exist yet, but we're waiting for the state. We will have an animation major as well, hopefully from the fall.
My name is Michael Smith. I'm assistant professor at York College and the director of a program, a 4-year program. I think I'm, other than probably you with SPS, the only other person there with a 4-year program, which is why I want to be with these people, because we can, draw from their great 2-year programs and hopefully add something to their experience if they're interested in continuing in towards a BS in our degree called Communications Technology, which currently has 2 concentrations, one in television production with an emphasis on nonfiction and web design and development, and a 3rd kind of concentration in development by my colleague primarily, Daniel Phelps here, that is kind of an emergent technology, physical computing concentration.
Which I must add is really cool.
Yes. He's the cool one. And so our program has like all of these, not unsurprisingly, also a unique backstory. The program was departmentless originally because there was a provost crazy enough to allow that, and someone was crazy enough to start it that way. The individual who was the former director of the educational technology department on the campus, and then it was transitioned into the Performing and Fine Arts department, where it still is to this day. And the faculty, there were faculty that were, the disappointing thing that happened in that time frame is I was the only faculty member that was actually hired under the Performing and Fine Arts department. The other 2 individuals that were hired were actually housed in other departments. Teacher education, was more of an educational technology person, and someone in computer science, and those 2 people kind of got lost in the weeds of those departments, and so the program lost some opportunities in that regard, disappointingly. But with Daniel's input, and we have another line in the making that we're going to be. We haven't decided what direction we'll go, but it's a pretty exciting space. So I'll tell you more details as we go.
My name is Janet Esquirol, and I am an assistant professor in the BMCC program that Professor Stein was speaking about. And my voice is going, so I'm sorry if I sound kind of hoarse. And just a little bit about me. I have taught in higher education at 6 different campuses in New York City, for-profit, non-profit, private, state. So I've seen a broad sort of experience of different design programs, but also my own personal background. I was fortunate enough to do my undergrad and graduate program with folks who are really, I think, leading the efforts to create really great interdisciplinary programs in technology. So hopefully that will sort of come up.
And I just want to state that I asked these specific people to sit on this panel for a very specific reason. We have 3 kind of like old war horses here, guys who have been through the trenches, who have been tenured, and who have gone through the whole evolution of digital media within CUNY. And I wanted the 2 people on the end who are newer professors who are coming into this discipline to almost kind of give their different perspectives, so we can have kind of a wide range of, hopefully, of views on what it means to teach digital media here at CUNY.
I'm Jeremy Couillard, assistant professor of new media at LaGuardia, and like Jim said, I just finished my first semester, so I'm still really learning the ropes.
So he hasn't been jaded or hard.
Keep saying that.
He's a great attitude.
And my background is visual arts, so I show in galleries and do animations, stuff like that.
So, we basically answered the first question here, which is kind of like who you guys are and what is currently the focus of your individual program. The next question that I want to ask you is, with the convergence in digital media, how can faculty effectively merge educational perspectives into a single discipline? And I would start off with Chris, since you're probably one of the first groups to actually do that, where you had 3 or 4 different departments. How were you able to bring those various disciplines together? You had different faculty, different points of view. That's a question that I think if we're gonna start to build multi or cross-disciplinary programs, that's one of the things we need to think about.
Right, well, I guess the first one to say is that it's an evolving process, right? It's sort of like, just like the idea of convergence itself, I don't think we're ever done with it. And a large part it has to do with just the fact that, you know, digital underlies everything, and it's a point we can all get to sort of start from, is that, you know, we all, you know, even if they're in video and we're on web design, we're dealing with digital media, digital images. I also think that in some ways, for our, at least in our department, and it may be different in a department that is more art focused, is that we ended up with majors that were sort of focused on serving a client in some respect, right? So it's not about making some art that's my idea that I want to get through, but I'm a graphic designer and I have somebody who's hiring me to do something, I'm doing film or whatever, and there's, you know, a project that we're working on, and I think that also helps. To be honest, another important part is just, you know, having a faculty that's open to talking and collaborating with each other, you know, and having that environment that fosters that and allows us to talk with each other and share ideas and put it together. And one of the things that's come out of that, because, you know, originally our programs were sort of separate. There was the multimedia side and the video arts and technology side, and recently we've created a new designation, MES Media Studies, that we put a few courses in that I think have really also helped us to merge that together. So one of the courses in it is essentially a look at the production process, where we're looking at how does a film get made, how does an animation get made, how does a website get made, from budgeting to wireframes and things like that. And so it's in one course, a look at across those different fields, and you can see some of the similarities in process and how it's working, and our students in both the disciplines take it. And so I think having those kind of courses in there too as well have brought our faculty together, because they came together to make them and teach the courses as well. That's another way that we've done it.
Well, I think it's a challenge, as we all know, for new media programs to sort of fit in. We've had good, really strong institutional support lately to green light these new tracks. So I'm going to say that with the right people saying yes to you, it's easier to improve new curriculum. There's always give and take. There's always some challenges, but by and large, in the last couple of months, it's been really good for us. We'll see how this works out. We're really optimistic. I think being in the humanities department, such a big umbrella. We have performing arts, we have visual arts, we have media studies, new media. We have a lot of philosophy. We have all this stuff going on in a giant department. It's actually a good thing. Fits in with the keynote quite well. That kind of old German system where everyone's super specialized. I mean, people are specialized, but they're in the humanities department, so that actually works for us in creating this new thing. And I'll quote one of my colleagues who said, my school, if you have a good idea, people will they'll try it out. People will never say no to you. They'll let you experiment, and that's what we've been able to do.
I don't think we were doing a good job of it, honestly, at first. Finding a way to connect the different types of medias that our students were doing. It was, in fact, even if you were concentrating in the original concentrations that existed, where one was in computer graphics and one was in systems and applications, as well as the television side, we were making everybody do a foundation in television. And it served us well. It serves us to build the TV program really readily, honestly. But it was only recently, in the past 3 years, that I discovered through networks online this space that some of you may have known, that I know Chris knows of, this digital storytelling community around this man Jim Broom, who created this course DS-106, and ultimately, the underlying element that I think was this wonderful tie was this notions of digital identity and talking about that as a construct across all of our students' interest in digital media, and embracing one's identity in the context of digital culture and networked culture, and how, if you're not thinking about that as a foundation to your practice, then there's going to be points of access that you're going to miss. And then the other one kind of stumbled in our lap, a lot of it due to Daniel's interest, were this other foundation, which was this Daniel's deep interest in maker culture. And we thought we'd find a way to bring that as another part of our tying foundation, which was this necessity to think of tools and our agency over them, right? And so we might manipulate the tool to become something we want it to be, not to necessarily how it's presented to us. And so we, made this pop-up kind of maker space, and now it's more, I guess it has a more defined home now and a bunch of interesting tools. But the foundation course that complements that digital storytelling, digital identity, network culture course is this hacking and building course, and that making tools and things into whatever you might imagine that you want them to be, not necessarily how they were presented to you, making them better. And so those two underlying like this comfort level with even physical like screwdrivers. It was like amazing to, Daniel will tell stories of like people that don't know how to not strip a screw. It's like put the Phillips screw, no, now you gotta get the vice grips and tear it out and start over. And so there was that sensibility with the tools, the physical tools, not just we're so invested now in the interfaces and interaction and constructing stuff through the mouse and the keyboard. We were like, whoa, how do we foster this sense of confidence and interoperability with the physical tools that exist in this world too, that we've worked with.
I'm not sure everyone understands exactly what, like when he's talking about makerspace, because most people understand like web development and design. Do most people understand what he's talking about when he's talking about like makerspace? I don't know, do you want to?
Well, I very quickly, quote, it's a DIY, do with others technology space where you'll confront not just, traditional media tools like this, but you might find basic electronics, like learning to solder, build circuits, 3D printing, CNC milling, practical woodworking tools, glue guns, things that would be an assemblage of a lot of different types of labs out there, just for the sake of building anything that you might imagine might support your process.
How many students in your class?
15?
Yeah, we run 2 sections of 15.
Just for now. And so that's our foundation, one of our foundation courses for all the majors in the world. And it's only in its 3rd semester.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the very kind of new, exciting. The digital storytelling component is a very exciting one because that asks every student to get web hosting, find a domain name, pick it out, get into do that basic sysadmin, like you want to hear a Gardner talk, go to the personal cyber infrastructure online, and that's the compelling argument for that course, part of that course.
You talking basically about Maker Faire?
Yeah, well, that's a lot of the types of people that congregate. I think the academy always seems to be a little bit behind, and it's like all these people are making all these amazing stuff just out of need and out of desire, and congregating together to share experience and tools and stuff like that. And we were at Maker Faire for the first time this past fall, talking about what we're doing and how we're trying to foster in higher education people coming up with not even necessarily the media programs, but pedagogies built around maker ideals.
To add, one of the reasons why we have this maker course is one of our first courses for our majors is that we really focus on the I/O, the input output, the taking from digital to analog, bringing from the real world to the digital world. And through that, we subversively teach them tools that they're going to use in whatever concentration that they go onto. So whether that's web or nonfiction television, they're learning how to blog. So they're learning WordPress. They're learning how to use cameras, still and video. They're learning how to engage in online communities to get the answers that they're going to need while they're out in the field. So we're doing all of that right off the bat, and we're using tools. I don't think they get it that they're learning the tools that they're going to learn in their 200 and 300 level courses, but they're much more prepared for them.
Did you get a lot of support initially, when you proposed this? Because like you said, sometimes the academy's behind.
Well, I mean, the nice thing is, there's two things that help in that regard. One, it's a program of one. So there's no one I need to seek permission from other than myself to write the syllabus and put it into the major itself. You know, there isn't this legacy of an English department with 20 faculty and divergent opinions of it. So that's the easy side in that regard. But I was very lucky to have Daniel, who was willing to, you know, I think he had his interest. He was building 3D camera rigs on his own and taking two cameras and flipping one upside down and building tools to, as 3D video was something that was interesting. And so I think that it's in his interest that we kind of followed that, as well as when it came to the space itself, you know, we're kind of crafty in terms of getting money, a little bit from tech fee, a little bit from the program. And the cool thing is the tools aren't as expensive as the others. The biggest one is we ripped apart our control room, the TV studio. We had a control room that we were like, let's shove that in the sound room, and then we're going to turn the control room into a new lab. And we literally, the two of us physically ripped it apart last summer. So we, I know it's not video. Yeah, so I mean, we did that. I mean, we have a level of support from, you know, the administration to do these kinds of things, but that was a big. We were ripping out cable and redirecting it and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, we got the support once they saw kind of the outcomes that we were getting from the courses.
Right. No, because I visited them a couple of weeks back, and the space was extremely impressive. You know, they're building like, you know, drones, not like just using drones. Well, they had a couple of drones, like prefab ones that they bought off the shelf, but they're like building their own like controllable drones, which in itself is really cool when you start pairing that up with the programming aspects, when you have people starting to develop applications in the real world where you can basically use your tablet now to control these devices that are, you know, you're going from the virtual, once again, like you said, to the physical world. And those are skills that, you know, I don't think that a lot of people see as more the traditional academics see where that is going, but you start looking at all the other tools that are coming out, like the, you know, remember the Wii? Those type of tools where you went from just a basic control device now to a different type of input-output device. So the next question, I don't know if Janet and
I have just one thought that is a little bit off the track of what everyone is talking about. One thing that I think that's really important when you're trying to encourage interdisciplinary to function well, because I've seen it dysfunction horribly at multiple institutions, is to really encourage collegiality. And I think a lot of campuses struggle with that. The faculty become isolated and don't kind of work as a unit. So trying to do something to encourage folks to come together and build for things that benefit the students, not per se, you know, their one specialty. Because when we're specialists, it's like very like a narrow focus. But when you're working in a team, in the way that we would encourage our students to work in teams, I think the faculty can just get so much more out of their career and their whole experience. Multiple schools I've seen struggle with this, where the personalities will fight very, very hard to the point where it's just absolute deadlock, and the state is actually saying, we've given you instructions, you have to make a change. And they're actually literally voting each other's departments down to just a stifling degree, so badly that, you know, a dean actually came in and said, okay, we're going to ask students for feedback now. So we're going to actually have a big campus meeting where we get feedback from the students about what they want from the interdisciplinary experience, which I think was really a great experience. It actually got the faculty to loosen up and come together. Another campus had a similar struggle where one group of faculty really felt like they were being minimized, and somehow whatever it was that triggered them to get past it, now they're on a roll of changing their curriculum so much that the faculty are complaining that it's too rapid. So when some people say the academy is behind or too slow, it actually can roll in the other direction where you're spending so much time on curriculum revision and revamping that you're not having enough time to excel at the changes that you've made and enjoy the rewards of that. I think BMCC actually, of all the campuses that I've ever worked at, does a really great job at collegiality, like really putting the campus together. But even there, I think there's more opportunity. I mean, students form clubs that are interdisciplinary, and faculty kind of do, but it would be interesting if it was more.
Are you guys all kind of situated in the same general area? Are you in individual silos, or?
I think,
Yeah, I mean, well, the one thing that's interesting is because we ended up taking faculty from 3 departments, it felt like our department is interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
But it's meant that we could probably do a better job of going back out to those departments again, you know, and working with the, you know, back to the music and art department and the communications and so forth, and do that. And yeah, now unfortunately at BMCC we have 2 campuses. We have a new building, and so
Right.
we're situated in the original building, and like the music and art department and the computer information systems department, 2 of the ones we collaborate most with, are physically located, you know, a few blocks away in another building.
so like remembering to do stuff together and like that, you know, you can have, even if you're not revising the curriculum, if you're just coming up with a program or an idea for something that would be beneficial to the students, that could be like a place where things are interdisciplinary start to happen, and then it kind of trickles down into curriculum.
But it still can happen. I mean, one of the things that's where, you know, this is very early stages and who knows where it'll go, is that some faculty from the English department actually came with an interest in making a game design major. And so that's brought together us in the computer science department and the English department and people from the math department, and sort of like getting together on that. And I think if that, we figure out a way to do that properly, that'll be a really, another new interdisciplinary major.
You got anything to say, Jeremy? Or you wanna
I
add?
guess one thing I was surprised that I was working on a lot this semester was just fundamentals in terms of like bringing things together. Just spending a lot of time teaching basic writing and stuff, like sending emails and stuff like that. I mean, because if you can't send an email, like you can't do anything with this stuff, right? So I guess I just spent a lot of time having my students write formal emails and basic writing stuff. So that was one thing. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that it sounds like, I mean, really, it sounds like we're a little bit easier for us to think about the keynote, you know, all those silos that we talk about, especially the fancy four-year schools. We're always, we're always taking changes. At LaGuardia, we have a strong tradition of learning communities. That's going to be 3 courses across 3 departments right there. So right away, we have people talking to each other all the time. So it's probably more natural. But on the other hand, I wonder what our experiences are with, if you have resistance, like you're part of new media. Like now I'm part of new media. Some of the English, my colleagues, they're still friendly, but they're like, what are you doing now? Like someone said, you're not going to teach English anymore. Yes, I am. I'm a writing journalist. I'm a writing teacher too. Like, well, you've left the fold somehow. Is there any resistance to taking on a new role?
I mean, I'm just looking at this, I'm in a little bit different situation than some of them, because my program that I'm running now is totally online. And it was easier for me, because SBS is a little bit more of in a startup phase, kind of. It's very easy for me to go to speak to any of the academic directors. We all sit within the same area, and we start talking about doing joint programs or sharing curriculum or sharing courses between departments. It's a much smaller entity. One of the things that we're a little bit struggling with is, as we start to grow, will we still be able to maintain that same type of collegiality, that same type of nimbleness that we're able to do in terms of curriculum development, particularly as it pertains to an fully online program. And then, which kind of leads into my next question, is how are we going to assess all of these interdisciplinary programs? What is the measures that we're going to basically use to assess the effectiveness of it? How are we gonna evaluate how faculty members are performing from a scholarship standpoint, because the disciplines are so varied and spread out? I'm gonna start off with Chris on this side. How do you basically, number one, how do you assess scholarship of the faculty within your individual disciplines at this point?
It's a good question. So part of this is I'm a new chair, right? I just started out a couple months into the job.
So I really put you on the spot as well.
So I haven't had to think about it in the same way as I do now. So a few things, I guess, where we're at, and also some of the things I think that are at BMCC that are changing that may be of interest. So with our current faculty, yes, sorry.
Just not to completely
Sure.
misalign you, but can you start by saying how are you going to be assessed in this new role that you have?
As chair?
Yeah.
It's a good, if you look at it, you're assessed as chair by your provost. And as far as I can tell, which, one of the things we don't do is we have students, here's our syllabus, here's our learning objectives. So the only thing I can see right now that they've been sort of, I had to give goals for the department, which I did like 3 weeks into the job, for the year, which I'm assuming at the end of the year, they're gonna come back with me and say, so how did you do based on these goals that you set forward? In the categories that Dave stated, which I had to do.
And so are those goals cascaded to the members of your department?
To some extent, but not really, right? Because really, in individual members, when you're being assessed, it's really about your individual output, and teaching is part of that, right? There's service, teaching, scholarship, the three sort of legs of the stool, and there's no requirement that those align with the goals of the department, right? Because your scholarship could be very different or not totally aligned. I think rightly so, because otherwise we'd force everyone in the department to have the same scholarship. Teaching should align in so much as the courses in the department align with the goals. So that's really, I think, where the two would come together, is that the curriculum that we're giving should, get students along with the course that we're looking to do. And really, I think in this question here, in terms of promotion and tenure for faculty, it's really the research and scholarship leg of the stool that's the one in question. That for everyone, ideas of service and teaching are pretty standard, and the ways that we assess those are the same. But for our faculty, it's different. And we have some faculty who came out of, let's say, the music and art department, who can go along tradition there and exhibit in art galleries and do things like that in order to get, those are already considered sort of equivalent of publication. And in some of our, let's say, video faculty, they might do a documentary film or something else like that they could put in if it gets shown in a competition or gets selected for something like that, that could also be considered. For some of the people who do things that are more web focused, I feel like there's less of that there. This is one of the areas where it's, okay, well, what do we do? And there's a few different, routes for that. Now I'm a little bit off of, that's a little bit off of the effectiveness of the program, because this is, individual faculty scholarship. I think we're making some headway on it. BMCC is actually, reconsidering some of the things that they're doing in terms of focusing the scholarship on pure peer-reviewed journal article or book, and being able to allow some of these things, as long as I'm in the process of trying to formulate a way of saying how to do this, in a generalizable way that can get new content, which to me partly says, is the faculty member doing work in the field that has been sort of approved or said is good by someone outside the college in some way, and allowing that to be something different than a peer-reviewed journal article. Although that's, there's also a possibility of people doing research on their own teaching, which is out there. But I think for people who, a lot of our faculty don't have PhDs, they haven't been schooled in how to write and publish and everything out there. So,
And that's because there's no PhDs within those?
Within some of the new media disciplines, right?
Right.
There's just not. So, and CUNY has already given people equivalencies. I don't have a PhD in it, and so I think this is an area I'm interested in. We're going to keep pursuing how best to write this up in a more formal way so that I can more easily go with those faculty and say, okay, this research that you're doing and this and here's ways that we can make it and have it recognized so that we can, when we put you up for promotion and tenure, it'll be recognized by the rest of the college and do it that way. The effectiveness of the programs, maybe I can leave that for other people in some ways too. In the end, to me, the key one is in the program is always like, what are the learning goals for your students and how are you meeting those? And that almost can go above whether it's interdisciplinary or not.
With a lot of the technology changing, do you, or as quickly as the technology changes, don't the goals, doesn't the measure of assessment also have to change? Because I start to think about how are they going to assess, and not to pick on Dan and Mike again, but you have this Maker Faire stuff, which is really kind of like new. You know, how will that be, you know, if we have faculty who are moving into those type of physical computing spaces, and we have students who want to get into that where they're actually building things, we need faculty to come in, how are they going to be assessed? How are they going to be judged against, you know, how are we going to attract those people if we don't have a measure of assessing them? You know, it's not a peer-reviewed article. Well, I guess you could write peer-reviewed articles on that, but, you know, there's a lot of different things to consider in that area. Anyone want to try that one?
I mean, I think right now, I don't know the answer. I mean, I think I'm looking for advice from, I think the digital humanities community is kind of trying to sort that one out just themselves, like web work is scholarship, and even in the context of traditional publications, you know, they're saying, well, I built this amazing tool that allows all this scholarship, how do I count that as scholarship? And then sometimes like you write about that tool and therefore then in some sort of journal, and then the two in combination become, and so I think I of myself, who's in the midst of trying to redo this and having reinvented my academic pathway, have to take ownership over framing myself in these communities and you know, and then having peers support that framing. That said, yes, in fact, you know, stuff that this guy does is really damn cool, and there's a lot of people that do it. And the other one, there's the other point is like, the funny thing about the web is you can go down the analytics rabbit hole, right? Like you have that option in your back pocket. Even if they're like, well, I was like, well, you know, okay, so yeah, you've made these pieces and they're part of a construct of a conversation online, so what does that mean? It's like, well, I can say like, here's this piece of, commentary that's in the form of an animated GIF, and this is a literal commentary, about MOOCs, all right, that happened. And I say, well, that piece was attributed and included in about 100 different presentations by academics. And so, what does that mean exactly? Is that count? It's like, I don't know, but if I frame myself well enough in a way that is supported by peers, I hope they will accept it. I mean, I'm literally, and I mean that, I'm gonna have to hope. Because that's what I've been doing for the past 3 years, you know, 4 years. So but I think the DH community has started to you know, carve a pathway for you know, those that are in the context of building and making. They may not be necessarily as well prepared to contextualize and write about it, but they need to get on board with that, I think. You know, they don't have to think of it as a publication that's peer reviewed, but they have to get on board with writing about their process and framing it in the context of a greater community, and therefore it should be acceptable. Whether it's that contextualization is in a formal journal or it's in a few blog posts, I don't think it matters. And I think peers that come from your community will agree with you, but you do have to. I think you have to step up and do that kind of work.
Yeah, I think it can be an interplay. I mean, there's some of it that you can probably need to and figure out new ways of validating work, you know, outside of the peer-reviewed journal article, and that might mean we create our own peer-reviewed systems that we can use. But part of it also, sometimes other more traditional formats come from the work there. So I can think of one of our faculty members who has tenure and doesn't need it as much, but she put out a little comic on how to use Arduino, and it ended up getting blogged and it had like 1 billion views. But then that led to O'Reilly saying, "Oh, can you do some work for us doing this other thing?" And now she's in talks to do a book with them. Right, so it's led to, that work has led to a more traditional publication route and actually doing the book and doing it that way. So I think you're definitely right, and then part of it is it can't be judged by your peers and other things if you're not putting anything out.
Another thing is to follow up on that, is to really educate P&B committees and provosts. I come from journalism as well, and I'm part of the Journalism Discipline Council. And there's actually an official document they circulate to provosts that says, for journalists, saying, this journalism is good and you should take journalistic publications seriously, and it comes from across the board, across the CUNY school. So there isn't really a new media discipline council yet, or there is.
No, there's not. I mean, that's actually something
Yeah, that kind of, that we should put that
I'm
together.
invite all of you
Right,
in the spring.
exactly. We need more meetings.
Trying to do that.
But that kind of education, I know in my school, legend, that these are secret committees, meetings, and I'm not a chair, so I'm not in these meetings. I'm on this little subject. But we have heard that all metrics have made inroads. Our P&B committee does take electronic scholarship seriously, online versus print. I'm sure if you had a blog, a web tool or something that made an impact, it would get recognized enough. And I'm sure it's maybe more traditional for your schools, that would be a problem. And I think, again, we are a little more flexible as a two-year school, but again, it's a matter of education, it's a matter of educating. There have to be some early pioneers who take that chance and say, hey, here's my work, it's digital, it has an impact, here's how I can show you this, to package it up and to really, like you say, to make sure you argue your case in court.
Right.
Because otherwise they won't do it. You say it's not a peer-reviewed article, good luck.
Just as a footnote, that in at least the computer science world, which I'm familiar with, over the years, the number of legitimate peer-reviewed journals have gone down tremendously. And if you have something that you want to publish, it's like you really have to hunt around and find a decent journal to even publish. And I don't know what they call them, but all these kind of pay for publication, they're just exploding, and it's even hard to understand which ones are legitimate and which ones are not.
Some are legitimate.
So
and this is
it's funny because you guys are kind of going up in this direction, we're going down in that direction.
Well, no, that is a meet in the middle. We all know Kathleen Fitzpatrick at MLA is busy taking blogs and changing scholarly publishing. So, it may be a meeting in the middle of understanding serious scholars, very serious scholars are being educated about the value of doing things a little bit differently. But the scholarly monograph has a certain weight, but that's changing too. So there is this kind of meeting in the middle.
Yeah, I think we can do, like there's a project right now underway at the Graduate Center called the Social Paper. That they just got an NEH funding, which is this idea of being able to write a paper with review and input as it's going along. And I've sort of looked at that and thought, that's also something that maybe we can emulate in some of these fields, is that as people are doing work, there's getting ways, it might not be exactly the social paper, but something similar where you can put it out there, you can get, feedback and input from people in a way that can be shown and formalized and put forward to the committee.
Are you familiar with ArchiveX, hosted at Cornell?
I haven't worked with that.
Yeah, it's very popular for physicists, chemists, computer scientists, and that's what it is. You can just self-publish in the database. I think they've got 1 million documents there, and it's either for pre-publication or just, I use it, I never intend to publish a document, but I want it out there, so I just put it in the database, and it gets indexed by Google, and people refer to it.
Right, and then it suddenly gets cited, right?
Yeah, it gets cited.
And then it becomes a piece of scholarship by the nature of the fact that it's important to other people, and that's part of the potential framing. It's like, well, it wasn't peer reviewed before it was out there, but now that it's out there, there's a bunch of peers that think this is an incredibly interesting piece of work for whatever area of excellence that you're talking about, or just research you're talking about, or just creative works. And that's what I think is interesting, is like, as you can, and that's what I'm saying, is like, that's where the analytics get interesting. It's like the power to find citation becomes, in all these myriads of ways, becomes really interesting.
I'm gonna jump ahead and ask another question, and I'm gonna pose it to some of the newer faculty within CUNY. How do you guys basically stay current with technology?
I was actually just thinking in relationship to the conversation that we were just having about how you assess the effectiveness of a professor or a class or a degree, and the stress that we put on publishing is interesting in relation to, for instance, if you want to bring something new to your curriculum, let's say in the makerspace or in video or somewhere else in new media. Let's say you want to apply for a grant because you're interested in 3D printing. I've heard rumors, and maybe this is not true, but I've heard rumors that the grantors are not as interested in giving grants to folks who cannot show that the faculty, at least one person on the faculty, has professional in-studio experience with said device. So you could have written your heart out about it, and that is not going to impress anyone who's giving large grants to expand programs. So the best way to stay current with the technology is to use it. But does that get in the way of your teaching? Is that a conflict? Like if you're doing too much sort of commercial work or?
If it's not set, I mean, if it's not recognized within your P&D committees, and the fear that you always have is that emerging faculty like you won't do it if it's not incentivized. Do you guys have? Do your campuses incentivize this type of continuing education in the same way as
Continuing education, I think yes, right? I mean, as you would say, continuing education, yes, but not professional work.
Not necessarily work for hire unless you can back it up.
So I just think it's interesting that something that came up while I was pursuing or looking around at the grant space for a project we're thinking about. One of the specific statements was you would be less likely to succeed if you don't have someone on your team who's done the profession. And because so much is new, brand new, you might not have faculty who have actually worked in it. We didn't have 3D printers when I was in advertising. So I just think it's an interesting thought. It's tough because you can't really pursue consulting in that way.
Jeremy, you have any thoughts on that?
I use all kinds of stuff because I'm an artist, so I'm always, one of the most generative ways for me to make new art is to learn new technology. So I'm doing VR development now, and just using it, and that's how we learn it. Forums is the best way. Just be in forums and just talking with the people who are using it. There's just so many wonderful nerds who somehow sit there all day and they'll answer you within an hour.
That's true.
Right? See, it's crazy.
We had just run an information session for new media 2 weeks ago.
Right.
James carried the ball, really gave an inspirational talk to our students about how if you do this new media, you're going to keep learning. You're going to keep, it's always new, and it's so exciting that way. And that's me. I was at PC Magazines. I get to try all the new stuff. I mean, more like regular stuff, programming tools. But I love being able to do a new thing, and I still do that in my precious few hours. I'm learning Ruby on Rails. I taught myself Ajax last year. Did a courseware package that I use instead of Blackboard. I wrote in my spare time, and I want to productize it. I don't have enough time to do that, but it's really pretty neat. And I'll show you. And it saves me a half-hour a day. I don't have to do Blackboard ever again. Anyway, we're on camera here. And I want to, you get it, get your Creative Cloud license for Adobe. You play around and you get the books. You get there's so much online now. You can take low-cost seminars. And it's always an exploration. I have a brother who's very creative. He has a 3D lab in his toy shop out in California. So I want to go visit him and see what he's doing. He develops games and stuff. He's a filmmaker and prints on glass. He knows how to do that. So he has less expensive printing. So use your professional network. Maybe that's another way to say it too. And go out there and see what people are doing. Get get ideas.
I mean, how do you bring these new things into the classroom? Like, how do you integrate those into your own curriculum, to your own practice? Is that?
You bumble first. I mean,
Well, I mean, yeah.
when we did, so the interim process for like transitioning this new digital storytelling course, so it was an open online course taught out of the University of Mary Washington, the University of Mary Washington students. It was a summer section. I participated as a student, you know, and I had gotten to know some people, and I was like, I'm doing this for our class, our foundation, and it's like, you know, be damned any, you know, professional curriculum process. So, but I still barely knew WordPress, and a big part of that was like getting the students to set up their web hosting and installing WordPress, and it was, I mean, it was pretty bad. But, I mean, it was probably my favorite semester still to the date that I taught it. And, because the funny thing is I took on the personality of a bumbling professor. And it was really, I mean, like, I had an ultra big ego, and that kind of gave me an opportunity to be okay, and he went from ultra, you know, it was based on the character from Journey to the Center of the Earth, like, yeah. And, so, you have to cut yourself some slack, honestly, and it's not like the learn with your students thing. Yeah, I mean, of course that's there, but there is a little bit of a, you know, willing to jump out of the plane without a parachute attitude you have to have for some of these things. Like, because it, you know, if you tell the students, oh, we're going to learn this together, they're going to be like, what the hell am I in this class for? But if you're willing to say, okay, you know, it's just like, I figured it out. I think I can figure out how to help them figure it out. We'll get there, and then you'll be better the next time. And instead of, you know, okay, I'm going to spend a semester preparing for this class, or a whole year and get it through curriculum and propose. And that's obviously a process important too. But at the same time, what happens? It changes anyway, right? And so, and then other people that you are colleagues with are like, whoa, you have to go in this direction now too. So, I mean, it was interesting, and then, you know, I think we struggle with finding ways to make sure that those goals that we thought we had intended, learning objectives, are still there and solid a few years later. And the best one right now is like back to the assessing the program. We have a portfolio class that's for juniors and seniors, and they have to get back to that domain and make sure they're using it for now and reconstruct it potentially as this formal presentation, not just this early adopter just playing and putting stuff out there, reflecting. So many of them have let their domains lapse and all this. They're like, is my stuff? And you're like, oh man, you know, and so it's like, somebody was like, I wish I had known this in CT 101. I was like, aha. So we're getting the portfolio students to talk to the CT 101 students, that foundation course, the digital students, and hey, just so you know, here's some advice that I'm giving you guys based on mine right now. I don't know if it's going to work, but that's where we're at. Things like that.
I mean, assessing the program was one of the things I did when I was at LaGuardia was, you know, we implemented a similar portfolio class, like as the capstone class,
right.
And as a way of looking at how students completed their work, how they did throughout the program. That final capstone project portfolio was kind of like the culmination of their entire learning process. And I'm looking at trying to integrate that now at SBS in an online forum where all of the students who will come in will hopefully leave, media professionals will leave with a final professional portfolio. But we're talking about like developing these new skills as new things start to shift and change. You know, one of the things I think that we need to be mindful of, or hopefully try to make the administration mindful of, is that faculty need time to kind of play with these things, to experiment. Beyond just the pedagogy of like, you know, running it in the classroom, but actually the pedagogy of, not even the pedagogy, but the technology aspect of understanding what you're doing with this stuff. Like you were saying, you were struggling with WordPress. You know, I was trying to teach Swift this semester to a small group of students, which is the new language that Apple's using for iOS development. And I was struggling. You know, it was that same thing, like you were saying, like you're bumbling along. It's like you're trying to figure out things to show them, and when they're coming up against problems, it's the same thing where, you know, you're relying on forums and other expertise from other people. But, you know, it's a struggle. how often do you guys update your curriculum, would you say?
Depends what you mean by update. Change exactly how we teach it versus formally update it.
Well, I know you probably change it probably every semester in terms of that, but formally update in terms of major shifts when, you know, languages change or new, you know, is it 10 months, 12 months? Well, how often do you, how do you evaluate when you should make those type of shifts?
We don't really have a formal process for sort of evaluating, like, this is the time we need to make a shift. It's the kind of thing that we discuss. We have, obviously, in the Department of Curriculum Committee and things like that, people who are, you know, assigned to each program. But, like, for example, in our programming side, we've gone, since I've been there, from director to Flash and now to JavaScript.
Right.
And a lot of it becomes sort of looking at what's going on in the industry, and then enough of us talking to other ones saying, like, people aren't really using Flash anymore, are they? You know, obviously once iPhone hit, all of a sudden that was like, started going down, so like, yeah, you're right, all right, we need to move. And at some point, sort of similar to Mike was saying, we're just gonna change it.
Do you coordinate or talk to like faculty, like your counterparts at other schools? Because we had an impromptu conversation, I forget when it was, when we were coming from, we were on the street somewhere, and you guys were talking to me about some of the shifts that y'all had made in your programs, and I kind of thought there was like, you know, this would be great if we could have these type of conversations on a regular basis. Because I was a program of one for a long time, same as you, Michael. You know, should we be having these conversations more often?
Sure, I definitely think so. And that's why, that's what I was saying before. And actually, anyone who's here, give me your email before we leave. What I'm going to basically do is get the college to give a little bit of money to have a more formal gathering of all media programs around CUNY. We did this about 3 years ago at the ACC.
I think it was like 6, to be honest.
It was, it was 3.
It was 3.
It was 3 years ago. Yeah, and do it again, but this time with the goal of.
There must have been more than one.
There was like, I think there was actually 2, but the latest one was about 3 years ago. Of making some kind of digital media program council.
And journalism has been helpful, and what we're doing there is still not happening. Standardized, look at syllabi across the schools and the way we're teaching.
So for any of the people who are here at the 4 years, you know, one of the problems that we have at the 2-year is our students want to go somewhere else. And how to best tell them where to go, evaluate the curriculum they're there. One of the things, you know, the secrets we all know is that in terms of talking about updating your program, we don't write course descriptions to really accurately reflect what's being taught. Right, you have to leave enough wiggle room that you have to write one every semester and then put it to curriculum committee and do that. Right, but what that means though is that a student reading from BMCC, reading something at, you know, City Tech or City College or Brooklyn isn't probably really reading what's really going on in that course, right? And there's no other way, unless I talk to a professor from there, for me to really know, okay, does that mean that you're actually doing this or that, or, you know, and where is it going? So as someone who says, I kind of want to do this, I can help direct them to do it. So that's something I'd like to see. That's, I think, part of that discussion helps there too, because we don't expect everyone to like change the course descriptions all the time, but we need to have a way of communicating better with each other.
That's true.
We're almost out of time, so I'm going to ask one last question. The last question I would ask is kind of like, if you could blow up everything and redesign everything from scratch, if it was a brand new, you know, tabula rasa, if you could begin from scratch, how would you build your program today, knowing what you know now? Stay politically correct now.
Well, that's an easy one for us because we're actually doing it. Right? We're launching whatever. We had tremendous support this summer to launch all these new tracks, and so we're really able to. A few compromises were made. But we really and next week I'm taking the very last changes to our college-wide curriculum committee. So we have 5 tracks approved, many meetings, many documents. It's going to be exciting to get that finished next week.
Yeah, I mean, because this tails back to the previous, like, we did a very good job of doing minor tweaks, formal minor tweaks, like course titles, descriptions, syllabus here and there. But over a year and a half in, I was lucky to have Daniel, and we talked about like what direction should we really take, because we knew we were due for like, and then we literally called it the 2.0 because we were at like 1.85 at this point, you know. And we really knew that digital storytelling, digital identity, network culture course was going to be part of the foundation, and we knew we had to change this like kind of tools. And originally it had been this computer science course, and it wasn't serving the curriculum up because it was a C++ course. And it was just so specific, and you know, it wasn't really, I'm not to say that like the skills of recognizing logic structures and the ability to code to a certain extent isn't useful. It is. And you know, we were like, oh, we'll have our own course that's like built around maybe, you know, just whatever application program, piece of program that, but then the makerspace stuff kind of fell into our vision, and with those two foundations, that really helped us realize like, okay, this is a solid foundation that's gonna help us for a while. And you know, and then we recrafted the concentrations accordingly that would allow us to do things that are flexible. So, I mean, I wouldn't say I wouldn't completely blow it up. Maybe we would change the concentrations. I don't know, but those are always tweakable. The foundation we feel good about. We did do our blow up. That happened, actually. That happened, it was a year and a half ago, and we had a little flyer that was like, be calm, enjoy the new and improved CT major, you know, and it had the degree requirements, and it really, we talked about like encouraging students to, we discovered through the registrar, you could do a change of major to the new requirements, which those that were within only a year or two, they should consider doing, and so there were pathways to allow them to do that, but, and then the idea that this physical computing, emergent technology concentration might come out of this is really exciting as well, so I wouldn't completely blow it up. I mean, maybe someday have our own department, that would be good.
I'm glad we didn't say make everything badges and nano degrees.
Yeah, I did do a nano degrees with a calculus like this, that just got retweeted by Borough, so that's good.
Although I think that is going to be one of the, going forward on these programs, I think one of the big questions is, do you, as things come up that you want to do you just make different tracks in a single major, or do you create new majors? And I don't think there's a simple answer to that.
I was involved with a previous institution at Columbia, program at Columbia. We did that for years, and tracks are good because they're flexible. We had an advisory board, and we're getting one in LaGuardia now, and that's kind of made up too. But it's a nice thing to say, hey, you know, industry experts, here's what you should be doing. We're looking for this, looking for Premier, not this, and we'll get that kind of input. And it's defensible to make changes, and you know when it's time.
And that's what we're looking to do with our online program at SBS as well. Is, you know,
and
the
you
whole
don't need
process
to
of
just go.
That's right. You don't need this. It's
Right.
simple approval, the response to market conditions. It gives your students what they need. And it's interesting because you get to teach the latest story.
Do we have any questions from the audience? We've been going quite a while.
I have one quick question, and maybe it is related to this idea of curriculum as ideas about an idea about ideas, as opposed to the, is it nano degrees?
Right.
If you were to construct a manifesto for digital media, that of ideas that your students would take away about the world, and about their place in it, and about the media they're designing, what would you include in that? I mean, and do your students say anything about their experiences in the programs that you run, about what they're taking away, about big ideas that they're taking away? Other than being prepared to design media for the world, what ideas are they taking away?
It's a good question, actually, and something that we're not asking our students directly, that we probably should be. You know, it's something I haven't looked into yet, but as far as I know, we don't have a sort of standardized, when you're graduating.
Reflection. I know we do a lot of reflection.
Yeah.
I know. I was going to ask you this earlier too. How does having an e-portfolio system that functions across, not just in sort of, there's difference between sort of saying like our department has one versus the college has one.
Well, that's good.
Affect things like that.
That's good for program assessment because everyone can deposit everywhere. So it's e-portfolio, but it's really a content management system. James has done a PPR for programs.
I mean, students were, you know, part of what we do with the multiple portfolios throughout the development of courses is that we kind of ask students to reflect on what they learned. You know, what did they take away from, you know, from that individual course material? You know, how did this material change them over the course of the semester? And then when they start to kind of piece all that together for the final capstone, it becomes interesting to see the writing that they've done at the very beginning of their journey as students and compare that against their final reflection at the very end. And what you'll see sometimes is that, you know, students' ideas about themselves, about the world, how media affects the world, radically starts to change or evolve. You know, everything from, you know, media as a tool of propaganda, as a tool of, you know, creating or fostering different ideas, you know, how it can be used for good or ill, you know, how different people interpret the media. We can look at two different types of media and take away different things from it. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that kind of happens in terms of those final reflections, in terms of how students start to evolve, in terms of their place as makers, creators, designers, developers, and the tools and things that they want to develop. And hopefully also how to profit from those things as well. And I mean profit not just in the monetary sense, but I don't want to say spiritual, but
Create value.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I think spiritual profiting is a good one. I think emotional profiting is a good one. Like, because I think like that. I mean, I don't think it's as baked into the program as best as it could, but we definitely love to. I mean, we introduced Gardner as a thinker in that first course, like the personal cyber infrastructure, and, you know, conversations about Creative Commons, like, because you have students that come in and it's like, oh, I don't want to put my stuff up on the web because it's going to be stolen. And that's a really great, rich, deep conversation to try to enter into and talk about. And, you know, well, there's ways that you can choose to be, and, you know, Cory Doctorow just published this new book about copyright. He has these three doctrinal laws, and which are, you know, Cory Doctorow and being a sci-fi writer as well. And, you know, these ideas of how the internet is a platform for promotion and becoming someone known, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you're going to make money. But it's really hard to make money unless you are willing to put yourself out there to a certain extent. And that's just one of the areas, and it's really deep. You know,
And it's to follow up, it really with the keynote. I mean, I really like the keynote. It's wonderful. But the end part about professional education, there's this thing about we're just teaching skills. You know, we really are teaching students to think about technology, and many of our students do. Very few students we have who just want to, you know, learn Photoshop. I mean, we really are teaching a worldview and a critical. It isn't liberal arts necessarily, but we are teaching students to think, and I'll defend that to anybody all the time.
Well, I think in a bigger sense, we're teaching people to make things,
Yeah.
and hopefully that they'll start thinking about that this is a power they have now to make things and make the world in ways that they want to make it influence, as opposed to doing something where they're punching a clock and just doing something for someone else.
Do you see those classic core competencies kind of flowing into that? Like critical thinking, writing, you know, quantitative skills, all the things that our provosts generally like to hear us talk about.
But I think this, if I can just make a comment, like the makerspace, the student really, they don't have, not like the other discipline, like you have to think in this way, but here it's like they have this space, then they use their creativity and try to solve problem and define, and all this I think is very important for them, no matter what they do in the future. And also like digital identity, although you talk about digital identity, it's basically media, in any kind of media, like in the old media, you even later change from digital to something else, we don't know. Still the principles, I think they learn will help and will serve them well.
Yeah. And also, oh, sorry.
Not a question, but a comment. I'm very encouraged by your statement about makerspace and the idea of, I noticed that a lot of times we use the word foundation course, stuff like that. I'm from architecture, and I always say to students, what's the most important part of a building? Try to get them to say foundation. If the foundation is solid, whatever you put on top has a good chance of staying. If the foundation is not good. So we're doing a program where trying to get students, architectural technology to learn how to use a hammer, how to use a saw. You know, skills that I grew up with and take for granted that everyone knows how to do that. But it affects your whole design mentality and the fact that there are things that do. We were once a manufacturing society, and the people who are getting the recognition are people who can make things, you know, self-sufficiency. So these students are learning how to measure, how to cut, how to hammer, and they're all complaining, boy, my shoulder hurts, you know? And the three basic things are, architecture is basically geometry, physics, common sense. And so hopefully they'll learn these things, and it'll be a basis, a foundation for their later work. Because if you don't know how to make something or fix something, then you're at the mercy of the people who do know how to do that and know how to charge you a lot of money to do that. Okay, thank you.
Well, yeah, sort of one thing I was going to add on to what we were saying is that I think one of the other things that I hope our students take out, and I do tend to see this because I get to often see students who go through it, is just going through the experience of seeing something that seems really difficult and hard to do, and then seeing yourself at the other end when they did it. You know, and just like, oh, I mastered how to do this thing in programming or do whatever else, and then going through that experience will lead them on to doing other things in life where they meet up with something and it's like, I need to do something new or learn it, and I've done that before, so I know I can do it. Even if they haven't maybe fully recognized all the internal goals and things we wanted to by the end, they can at least have that experience of coming up against something hard and pushing through that and learning how to make something.
Any other questions? All right, then. Well, thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed it.